Okay. Hi, and welcome to another exciting episode of EPiServer Weekly Developer Office Hours something. That's what I'm going to call it from here on out. I'm just going to make up a new title every time. EPiServer Developer Weekly Show thing. I'm James Stout. I am a technology and developer evangelist for EPiServer, formerly known as Ektron. And with me, I have a couple of really great guys and longtime Ektron developers, Daniel McGarry and Ken McAndrew. So Dan, why don't you give a brief intro?
Okay, great. Thanks, James. My name is Dan McGarry. I'm the founder and lead CMS architect at Avantes Web Solutions. I've been working on the Ektron framework for about 8 or 9 years at this point, and I'm looking forward to diving in fully on the EPiServer framework more.
At what point do we just start rounding up to 10, Dan? Is it safe yet? Is it safe for both of us? Because
I think it is.
yeah,
I do think it is. Yeah, it's probably might as well just put a pin in it, call it 10 years. Yep.
might as well. I think we're safe rounding up. I'm at about 8.5, and you're 8 or 9-ish. So yeah.
Yeah.
And Ken.
I'm Ken McAndrew. I'm a senior technology consultant at Celerity. I'm an Ektron MVP, and I think 5 or 6 years for me. I can't really remember.
Yeah, it'd be about 5 years because you started about the time that I started working for Ektron. That's when you started working on an Ektron implementation.
We had our first demos just before 8.0 came out. So.
Okay, yeah, so a little over 5.5 years then.
Like to round up to 6. No.
Yeah, it makes me feel old when I think about it. Been doing this a long time. So let's talk about aliasing, redirects, and search engine optimization. Specifically, wanted to talk about URLs in that context. We can go off on tangents if we choose, but let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to share my screen and hop over to an Ektron work area just to give a brief overview of the functionality that's there. Okay, let's get out of the infinite mirror effect. So do you see the work area?
Yep.
Great.
Yes.
By the way, this is what I love about working on a Mac. I can just slide over, slide back. It's beautiful. So just looking inside the Ektron work area, and under settings, configuration, we have URL aliasing option. And I want to look at the settings first, and we can look at the variety of aliasing types and configuration options here. And I'll hit edit. So for this site, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn on the 4 types of content aliasing. You can alias users and community groups as well. But we'll take a look at just content aliasing for today. So manual aliasing just literally is what it sounds like. The author or an admin would have the ability to manually type in an alias for any given piece of content. So that would be any HTML, smart form, page builder content inside of the CMS. That one, to me, has its ups and downs. I have to have a lot of trust in my authors in order to just enable that and let them have at it, because I've seen too much variance in what one author will enter versus another.
Isn't there a role that you can use to secure who can and can't do manual aliasing?
Well, that's a good question. Let's take a look. Since we're here.
Yeah.
So this would be a system-wide role in that case. So yeah, alias author, alias administrator roles. But even so, it's something that I see as prone to human error.
Yeah.
Because it is just a text box. But I have done, and Daniel, you were talking about a potential strategy around using manual aliases, but in a more automated fashion, and we'll take a bit of time to delve into that in a minute. We also have folder and taxonomy-based aliasing. These are automatically generated aliases. So it's either going to follow the folder tree or the taxonomy tree that applies to the piece of content. Now, if you have content that this you're supposed to have a taxonomy alias, but the content doesn't have any taxonomy applied, then obviously it's not going to get that alias. Where folders are a one-to-one relationship, you're guaranteed one alias for each piece of content, which is good from an SEO perspective. Is you want one primary alias, you want one canonical URL. And taxonomy, because it's a one-to-many relationship for the hierarchy to content, you can end up with a lot of different aliases, especially if you set up multiple rules, or if the rule applies to content that's in multiple locations in the same tree, then you can get multiple aliases for that content, and then it becomes challenging to pick which one is the primary URL. The advantage that the manual folder and taxonomy aliasing provides is if you're doing interior linking, so if you're providing a link inside of a piece of content that you're authoring to another piece of content inside of the CMS, then you will be able to select which of those URL aliases you want to insert. And the system will actually provide that to you. But regular expression aliasing doesn't do that. The real purpose for the regex aliasing is to provide aliases for, say, values that are otherwise not found inside the CMS. So if you want to provide a query string value for filtering a news page by category ID or something like that, then you could incorporate it into a part of the alias and just tack it onto the end. And that would be regular expression aliasing, but it's not going to provide interior links. We have extension options. And Ken's favorite thing is you cannot remove the .aspx option.
And you can't make it the secondary to the slash.
Right.
Which you used to be able to do.
Ken has a very
we're
good
not here to
blog.
dwell. We're not here to dwell on the past, Ken.
No, I know, but we're talking about Ektron, so there you go.
But you can talk. You can insert your own as well. So if you want to add like an HTML extension, I think slash is really the convention that most people stick to. But there's not really any detriment that I'm aware to using a .aspx. What's the detriment for that, Ken?
Primarily if you're advertising, like marketing. I mean, if you're going out there and you're saying, you know, come check out my blog on celerity.com/blog/kmcandrew.aspx. That sounds weird. And people aren't going to remember the .aspx. How many times do you hear anybody giving a file extension when you hear a radio or TV ad?
Well, other than .html.
Even then, you don't hear that. People do
no, not for
aliasing
most of
or
this.
something.
Yeah. Well, if it's used for marketing purpose, it's going to have a vanity URL that may just simply redirect anyway.
Right. I mean, and that's fine if it's just a vanity that'll redirect to a real one. But when you're giving out the vanity one, you're promoting and marketing. You're not going to use a .aspx or a .anything standardly.
Yeah. So, but you know, you typically want to use a slash. I think that is the convention that most people would adhere to. And then you can specify a default replacement character, which I always change that to a hyphen.
Yeah.
I think out of the box it comes as an underscore.
Yeah, hyphens. From what I have understood with SEO over the years, hyphens tends to be the more accepted SEO type than underscores are. I usually use underscores in file names that I'm aliasing around, but I'll use the hyphens in aliases.
I do the same. I'm not sure whether it's really something that impacts SEO directly or if it's just convention.
I don't think
that
it
everybody's
impacts,
unofficially agreed on. Go ahead, Dan.
James, I don't believe that it actually impacts SEO directly. However, I have worked with several SEO experts, and for whatever reason, they just find the hyphen to be more readable. And I just think that's a tomato tastes great, less filling kind of a thing, and it's just a lot easier to acquiesce and keep your powder dry for other battles than it is to get caught up on what a replacement character is.
Well, also, if you think about it, like if you paste a URL in and show a URL on a page, if the link has an underline to it, the underscore may get obscured by the underline of the link.
That's true. It's easier to type. If you're typing a URL, it's easier to type the hyphen if you're typing one out than it is the underscore. So you don't have to hit the Shift key.
Yes, Kenny, we just said that.
Exactly. Yep.
Kenny just tweeted the same thing.
Oh, did he? Thank you, Kenny. And then we have the query string action. So you can actually append additional query string values to the end of the alias, should you desire to. And that does work. But it's configured here.
Yeah, it's the append parameters to alias. I ran into something, I think, once where somebody wanted to do that, and if you don't actually set the append parameters to alias, it will actually blow up if you try to do it.
Depends on which configuration.
Yeah.
I think append parameters to alias is the one that I always set it to. You can have it replace or override parameters within the alias, which might be one of those that would cause it to blow up if you do it a little bit wrong. But append parameters to alias, if you're just tacking on extra values at the end of the alias as a new query string, then that's going to be the one that you want.
Mm.
All right, so we can pop into aliasing rules, and we can actually look at the aliases. This is a sample of the content marketing platform site with some blogs imported, so we can actually see the automatic aliases here. So if you click on aliases, it's going to show you all of the aliases, whether they're automatic or manual. We will not list the regex aliases. Now we can pop into adding an alias rule. And we can specify the source type. So this would be an automatic aliasing rule. The manual is just you type it in, so there really is no rule for you to define there. The source type, taxonomy or folder, you can give it a name. If you have multiple sites, if it's a multi-site installation, then you can segment the aliasing rules by site. And this, as we were talking about before we went live, is the priority order. So if you have multiple possibly conflicting alias rules, let's say you have an automatic alias and a manual alias for a piece of content, you can say that the automatic alias has top priority, for example. I don't think I have any taxonomy on this site. But you'll notice that the language option comes up if you got this set to taxonomy, because taxonomy names, taxonomy node names can be translated, but folder names cannot. Okay, so it gives me the information that I set above, and I can specify an alias root. So if I say I want the site and the content folder in the site, and save that. And then I can actually go in and say I don't want the site part of that path, or I don't want any of that path to show up. So we can see the example preview at the bottom is just going to be /content title. If I change this, /, so it's going to show up as if it were a directory. Or I can, so I exclude from path, I'm able to filter out the beginning of the node, whatever front-running portions of the node that I want to get rid of. And then we have a replacement character map. So these are all of the default replacement characters that come out of the box with Ektron. But if you find that there's a special character that's not represented here that you want to replace, so I'll just type one in, but it's going to be, you can just say I want this to be the replacement character, or I want this to be PCT or something like that, and add a replacement entry. All right, so a little bit buggy there.
I like that the replacement doesn't have to be a single character, because like what I would usually do for ampersand is change it to hyphen and hyphen, like spell out the word and.
Right. Yeah. So you get some options there. Okay, and we can look at some regular expression criteria for aliases. And this has an expression library. I'm not going to go too deep into it. But you can see that this would be useful for having just, this is the way I usually use it, the parameters that are typically not part of the CMS, so like year and month, if you want to provide additional filtering options. So something along those lines. I don't know why that came in with spaces, but it's pretty straightforward, I think. So anything that you guys would add to that? Just general aliasing inside of Ektron?
The one thing that I've had clients that unfortunately with folder aliasing, I recommend highly folder aliasing. I think it's a tremendous feature, and it's a way to make sure that without forcing manual aliasing, without having to think, you get a nice SEO friendly URL alias generated every time. I have found instances where particularly on some very large microsite installations where we couldn't use folder aliasing because the nested folders were so deep that they wanted to basically pick and choose what folders got included within the alias structure. So that is unfortunately one minor limitation to folder aliasing, but in my mind, it's the negative in that regard, or the potential negative, is far outweighed by the positives. And I think usually it's one of the first things that I do when I'm setting up or architecting a site is to enable folder aliasing and define those rules folder by folder.
Yeah, the folder aliasing is always good. That if you want to get around some of the limitations, the taxonomy aliasing can also be your friend. That's if you set up you've got your pages or content or whatever. And actually, a good example is if you have, we've talked before on these about a good structure for your content area, having a pages folder and a content folder. Like pages for page builder stuff, content for normal. If you were intermixing those for whatever reason, where content is also stuff that is like renders a page out, for example, if you want those to appear under the same canonical URL, then the taxonomy aliasing is the way to get that to happen, because then you can assign it both sides to the same taxonomy. And depending on how your content is structured, if you mimic your content in your pages exactly, you could do it with folder aliasing and just exclude the word pages and the word content. But if you're if you're not otherwise taking care of that, then you're going to have you're going to missing URLs, or you're going to have to somehow take care of it. The taxonomy aliasing just gives you some flexibility, multiple aliases to a thing depending on where you are in the site, stuff like that.
Well, especially if it's after the fact. So that type of architecture, if you want to do folder architecture for aliasing, then it's best to know that going in, so that you understand when you create a folder the impact that it's going to have on the way the content URLs are structured. If you're going in after the fact, then you can go in and do taxonomy in order to get the logical structure that you really want without having to try to move and reorganize your folder structure.
Yep. Agreed.
The other feature that comes out of the box as of 8.6 and beyond is redirects. So here we've got a lot of redirects in, but it's pretty simple to add a redirect. The one that I think is the most interesting here is the 200, because it actually would allow you to alias, create a manual alias for a URL, or a vanity URL, but it still renders. It doesn't actually redirect, it just renders. So I think that's pretty cool, is you can alias an alias if you wanted to. You could say that, create a vanity URL and reference the alias. So I think that's pretty cool. And I've got a couple of scripts on the Ektron Developer Center for exporting and importing redirects. It's just sample code. So if you have a map, like you're doing a redesign, you've got URLs mapped from A to B. Oh, I'm getting a bite. Don't know if you guys heard the doorbell or not.
Yep.
But if you have the URL map for old site versus new site, then you could take that, put it into some kind of logical format like a comma separated file, and import that into the CMS rather quickly.
Mm.
And I'll be sharing those links out on Twitter. So with that, let's talk about more off-the-wall use cases or implementations. Dan, I know we had been confronted with a question on the Dev Center that both of us responded to, and I really liked your response. Would you want to cover that just briefly?
Yeah. I know James tweeted out a link to this. I forget the actual URL or the title, but the original poster was looking for a way to create a manual aliases that basically adhere to or were the ID of the content record. And I think both James and I, our first knee-jerk reaction was, well, why? And second, content strategy. Immediately that's where my mind went. That okay, what if I were tasked with doing something like that? What I would want to do is create a content strategy that looked at the on publish event and look to see, is there a manual alias assigned to this? Is it the ID of the content? If so, then do nothing else. Go ahead and create one. Actually, I do recall what the fundamental issue was. That embedded links from other content, people changing the content title within targeted content, breaking embedded links in certain pages. So that was the broad brushstroke. Both James and I thought, well, okay, a content strategy would be the way to go. The original poster did respond and say, well, that's great for moving forward, but it doesn't help me with existing content. To which I sort of chimed into the conversation and said, well, look, the alias manager can certainly allow you to create aliases. I'm sure you could script out something that looked at your current content, scoured it, and created manual aliases that used the ID. And you could even, in case you needed to back those out quickly, prepend or append to those aliases maybe a special character like a /0 as a prepend that would allow you to quickly identify those aliases if you needed to back it out. So that was one part of the conversation. The other part of the conversation was, well, have you considered what this might do to your SEO? The SEO experts that I've worked with would probably have a conniption over this kind of suddenly their reports go from domain / my favorite page / to domain /0001 / having no way to then reconcile and say, well, what's getting better traction from a marketing standpoint. So I did caution the original poster to consider the overall scope of the request and where it was coming from too, given that it did seem to be that it was part of the source was for forgetful users renaming content and not realizing that, well, there was there's content linking to it. I also suggested the the content, the link checker in the settings area, which I think, I don't. It's not necessarily automated, but there could be some way of leveraging, some bit of code that would automate that tool and provide a report to this webmaster. If that were really needed, every morning, here's your broken link report. Or just get into the habit of, when you sit down with your coffee, log in, put something on your smart desktop that allows you to run that report, one or the other. But I had it beaten into me several years back. This is probably in the 6 to 7 years out of the 10, by an SEO expert that really needed the links on a listing page, the text that's within that anchor tag matches the page title, the H1 on the page, the description, and for her that was that was her bread and butter. So I know things do change in the SEO world over time, but having that strong linkage between what is in an anchor text that's linking to a piece of content and what that content, that page displays when you get there, does have value. Anyway.
Well, I think it has value as an end user, as a site visitor. So if somebody copies a link onto a forum or something like that, or if they just email me a link, it's nice to know kind of what I'm getting into there. If it's just a number, then that's harder to reconcile. You also see in at least Google Analytics, you don't always have the page title along with the URL. Sometimes the reports that you get out of Google Analytics, if you just go in and look at it, the standard reports, you get the URL with statistics, but you don't get the title. And so how do you know what that URL is? It's harder to find that information out.
And that was her fundamental point too, which is what, but having domain/template.aspx ? ID equals had no bearing in her world. So.
Yeah, so I could see it if it's referencing, say, products by ID or downloads by ID or something like that. So you're not going to get friendly URLs out of YouTube, but I see that as a different story. If it's not a marketing, or if it's not a text content oriented site, then maybe you can get by with that. But if it's a marketing site, then I definitely would not want to have just the IDs as URLs. But yeah, the strategy that I think you tossed out was, whenever content is published, you're basically hijacking the manual alias field.
Yep.
And inserting an automatically generated manual alias into that. You're just generating it on your own. You're not relying on the system to generate it, but you're generating some alias and inserting it as the manual alias for that content. And that's something that I've done before, as we were discussing earlier. I've had a client who really wanted the language code, like ENUS or FRFR, to be prepended on the URL, and that was the solution for that as well, was go ahead and automatically generate an alias and then prefix it with that and store that inside the manual alias field as the primary alias for that content. Mm-hmm. Another concern, whether you're doing manual aliasing or some combination of automatic and manual, or even just automatic, is multiple URLs for the same content, and you will get hit on that by Google if you allow multiple URLs to render the same content. Mm-hmm. The workaround for that is either to enforce canonicalization, where you have one primary URL and all other URLs are set to redirect to it, one way or another, or you can set a canonical URL metadata tag, and that's something that I can tweet out. Google has a blog post on it. It's coming from Google, and everybody else seems to do whatever Google does. So, but it's just a simple meta tag that you can put onto the page. It says, hey, this, no matter what is in the URL bar, this is the primary URL for the content, which prevents Google from indexing the same content for different URLs and punishing you for it.
Yep. That's a good bit. I actually did use that recently on a project about a year ago. So, and it works very, very well.
Yeah. Something else that I'd like to show, if you are hijacking the alias, the manual alias, if you're inserting your own generated manual alias, you can actually go into the folder properties and uncheck, just check in the folders or the tabs rather that you want the content author to be able to see. So if you say, I don't want them to see the templates tab, you can hide that aliasing tab from them so that they don't get the option to manually type one in. If you're generating the aliases, generating those manual aliases, and you don't want the author messing with it, you can just simply hide the tab from the author. Now, it's still there when you're just simply viewing the content, and they can click the alias tab and click on the alias to go to the content inside the site. But when they're editing the content, they won't see that option.
Yeah, but one warning on that, if you create a new page builder page, they will have the option.
Yes, they would have the option then. I don't give standard content authors and page builder authors the same level of permissions, or I typically consider the page builder authors to be a little bit more advanced anyway, and you can offer them a bit of instruction and guidance.
Yeah, but that gets into permissions in Ektron, and that's a whole different conversation.
It's a whole different conversation. It's a different EPiDev. Yeah. Okay, so we're past the half hour. Any final comments from either of you?
Nope.
Okay.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, so everybody who watched, thanks for watching. And if you have any questions, feel free to tweet out using hashtag EPiDev, EPiDev, and we'll monitor that even when we're not on the air and try to answer any questions we can. So thanks for watching.